Yo, what's up, y'all? I'm back at it once again, the Koski Fun Day. And we're gonna talk about the Loyal League. Just going back to the Civil War, pre-Civil War era. Also kind of centering on what the National Migration Convention kind of had on, you know, kind of centering on back. And these were the kind of the integrationist cats, the Frederick Douglasses and William Howard Days and people like that we talked about in many video descriptions. Just to give a quick backdrop of the Loyal League. The Union Loyal League was a quasi-secretive men's club established during the American Civil War, 1861 and 1865, to promote loyalty to the Union of the United States of America. The policies of the newly elected 16 President Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865, served in 1861 to 1865 in to combat what they believed to be treasonous words and action of anti-war, anti-black Copperhead Democrats. Though initially nonpartisan, by the wars last year, there was an open alliance with the Republican Party, pro-union Democrats, and the union military. All right. So we're gonna go down a little bit more. There was an alliance. Now, during the Reconstruction era, union leagues would form across the South after 1867 as working auxiliaries of the Republican Party, supported entirely by Northern interests. Right. That's the key right here. You know what I'm saying? Supported entirely by Northern interests. All right. They were a secret organization that mobilized freemen to register to vote and to vote Republican. They taught freemen union views on political issues and which way to vote on them, and promoted civil projects. Air Fonte report. By the end of 1867, it seemed virtually every black voter in the South had enrolled in a Union League, Loyal League, or some local equivalent local political organization. Meetings were generally held at a black church or school. All right, so that's where the meetings were usually held at. The Ku Klux Klan was a secret organization of whites that resisted what they saw the excess of Reconstruction. They sometimes terrorized and even assassinated Union League leadership. Founder Nathan Bedford Forrester grew uneasy about the group's tendency to lawlessness and disbanded it in the 1860s. And he's talking about the Klan on that one. But we're going to go more in depth because many people don't know. As I said here, the Union Leagues in the South were mainly black. You know what I'm saying? But got liberal white money from the North. You know what I'm saying? It was a secret organization. We're going to tap a little bit more into that in this video because it's got to be explained. We have white liberals supporting us against the white conservatives, things like that. But we're going to see what happened to this kind of alliance and what went down. All right. The Union League in North Carolina. Now, I got one for every state in the South. We're going to start here in North Carolina. The Union League was instituted in the North in 1862 when the cause of the Union was at its low ebb, with a view of organizing and strengthening loyal sentiment. The idea was popular and society spread it rapidly over the North, the local organization being a connected of loose federations. Much of its credit is given to the organization and political effort when it was most needed. And when the need disappeared, most of the various branches disappeared or tended to become social clubs composed of members of the same political affiliations. Society came to North Carolina with the Union armies, and from time to time, new members were admitted from the Union men in the state. A few Negroes were also initiated. Remember, this is a secret society, okay? A few Negroes was also initiated, but no systematic attempt was made to extend it widely until 1866, when it became evident that Congress would control the Reconstruction interests of the Republican Party, and that Negro suffrage meaning the vote, was inevitable. Agents of the Freedmen Bureau have been actively working among the Negroes with a view to use them politically if the opportunity should present itself, and to extend their influence very widely among the newly emancipated. They had at the same time done all in their power to alienate them from the native white population. In the process, they learned much about the characteristics of the Negroes and became aware of their general instability. It was therefore clearly apparent that there was a necessity of taking further steps to control them, to bind them in the interest of the ambitious Northern politicians by sometimes which would appeal to their pride and their emotions and would at the same time organize them, right? Now they're being organized by Northern politicians. The Union League furnished an ideal instrument through the effect upon of its ritual upon the ignorant and emotional Negro, and through the discipline of its organization. It was for this reason the chosen instrument of the carpetbaggers to carry on the work so well begun by the Freedmen Bureau, and thus became a second handmaiden of radicalism in the reconstruction of the state. Introduced by carpetbaggers, it was for an entire period of its existence in North Carolina, controlled by them, chiefly for their own aggrandizement, and that reason alone would have won an undying hatred of the native white population. In its development, however, it gave additional abundant evidence of its entire unworthiness, and its very name remained a symbol of all that was evil in Reconstruction. During the latter part of 1866 and the early months of 1876, a campaign of extension was entered upon. This is entirely in the hands of the aliens, for while nearly every native white Republican joined to prove his loyalty, the newfound devotion to the Union, the more respectable elements soon became disgusted, and those who had joined for selfish motives soon found that whatever hopes they may have cherished of gaining advancement through the power of the organization was limited to the wishes and aspirations of carpetbaggers who regarded the organization as a personal asset and employed it accordingly. It often suited them to follow the election of the natives of important positions, but frequently the natives got only what was left. These are native whites. Even when the position was thus secured, more frequently than not, there was recognition of the fact that it was due to the grace of the aliens, and in consequences, their influence was pronounced on the conduct of office. In the western part of the state, because of a small Negro population, the larger number of native white Republicans, and also because here were to be found few carpetbaggers, the League never became so important of a factor. Western Republicans joined the League, but it was never popular in that part of the territory, and that its importance was chiefly confined to the central and eastern section of the state. The work of the extensions proceeded rapidly. By April 1867, the state was well organized. By August of the same year, practically every Negro who will vote at the approaching election was an enthusiastic member of the League. Some few declined to join, preferably to be guided by their former owners and an interest in the political life. This species of ingratitude, not to say treason, for so it was regarded by the carpetbaggers, was seen to be a very dangerous menace to the political solidarity of the race. And the colored members of the League were not only encouraged, but ordered to deal with such unruly members of the race in a way that convinced them of the wisdom of yielding to Northern guidance and the acceptance of the planned hostility to the whites. The treatment, according to the dissenters, was usually effective. A very small portions of Negroes dared to remain out of accord with the majority of their colors. Those who did were subjected to every type of violence and intimidation. In Wilmington, a Negro was severely whipped by the order of the League. In Edgecombe, there was a similar case. In Frank County in 1868, the League had sent out a deputation to attack a reputable white farmer who advised his servant who had come to him with advice not to join. Instances of this sort may be multiplied indefinitely or occurred all over the state. Notices containing threats were opposed. Political addresses were bound in suggestions of violence. Strict orders were given by their leaders not to attend conservative meetings. To assist in controlling the man, the League established for Negro women who bound themselves not to marry or otherwise associate with men who were not members of the League. Thus, through the boasting of their libertarian ideas and condemning the tendency of the South to resist different options, opinion in the matter of political, the carpetbagger from the beginning not only discouraged but prevented any possibility of the Negroes of exercising any independence and enjoyment of franchise. That, of course, cannot be the purpose of Reconstruction, and they cannot be severely condemned. Whenever their characters remember from refraining at the beginning from overturning a policy intended mainly to secure party supremacy. Such thing was scarcely respected from their kind, and therefore chiefly condemnation must be directed against the policy itself and against the barefaced hypocrisy which accompanies its execution. The plan looks simple to a complete and unyielding organization, to force the Negroes to register, arouse them in a high-pitched enthusiasm for the Republican Party, and a corresponding degree of hostility against conservatives, and for that matter, any cases against all white natives. Lead them to the polls in an unbroken phalanx which will secure Republican supremacy in the state and assist in preserving it in the nation, and in a process, put in positions of trust, honor, and profit, with the emphasis due upon the latter. The patriotic, would-be statesman who had dominated the organization from the beginning. Never was a political plan carried out with greater temporary success, but never were the members of political organizations so unfit through ignorance of their privilege of suffrage, and therefore unmoved by the argument. They were easily handled as to so many sheep. It is no exaggeration to say that out of the Union League, to a great extent, it grew the Solid South. The native white people from it conceived a dread of Republican supremacy, which became inseparable connected in their minds with Negro domination, and learned from its lesson a political organization which have not yet been forgotten. The results of the League organization are thus somewhat clear as it proposed in those conducting it, but is very ancient from the study of its constitution and ritual that its career in the South was a perversion of the standard of its founders, and that nothing was added further from their minds than violence and crime, which its name was inseparably connected. It is therefore very difficult for anyone who knows the organization only through these documents to understand the positivization that its memory is held. That is the result of its later development, due in part to its bad character of the white leaders and the license to which the liberty soon developed with the Negroes. It is true, not only in scattered cases is there proof that the League and Council resolved upon the commission of crimes, though there are many instances of this kind that is usually unknown. But it is a fact established beyond question that the members of the organization were very frequently acted together in crime, and their meetings were occasion for violence and incendiary speeches intended to calculate the roles of Negroes against the whites at whatever cost. And that in all sorts of rash and extreme statements, violent threats were made. It is not wonderful then that the ignorant, emotional Negroes should come away with a firm belief that the gospel of kill and burn, which is so consistently preached by their leaders, was indeed a command with a final authority behind it. This is emphasized by the character of the literature sent out by the national organization. Much of this incident, all of it was intended to arouse hostility against political opponents. The element of secrecy in the League was a powerful factor in making it irresistibly attractive to the Negro. The ceremony of initiation was skillfully devised to heighten this feeling. Professor Fleming, apt in expressing it in saying, it made him feel fearfully good from his head to his heels. The meetings were also held at night, not only to secure full attendance, but because the effect was thereby greatly increased. The night, too, was a time when the Negroes regarded as particularly their own. The chief delight of the freemen was to be found in the initiation. In the outline, they were the follows. The council assembled in a hall, usually a schoolhouse or church. An assistant vice president went into the anteroom where he addressed the candidates, describing the purpose of the order as the preservation of liberty and the perpetuation of the Union and the maintaining of supremacy of the laws and the Constitution, securing the ascendancy of American institutions, the protection of loyal men, particularly of members of the League, the elevation and education of labor and laboring men, and the giving instruction in citizenship. The candidates then declared their attachment to the principles of the Declaration of Independence and their allegiance to the United States, pledging themselves to resist all attempts to overthrow it, and to obey all the rules and orders of the League and keep inviolate all its secrets. The neophytes were led into a council room where they were at the altar draped with the American flag, with a Bible, Declaration of Independence, and a Constitution resting upon it. Other emblems that were prominent position were a censer of incense, sword, gavel, ballot box, sickle, shuttle, emblem, and other articles symbolic of industry. Hail Columbia and the Star Spangled Banner were then sung, and the president made a prescribed address, which was entirely upon the comprehension of the freemen. A prayer for the loyal people of the United States and the members of the League, which followed after the fire of liberty, was lighted on the altar, and the neophytes placed a hand upon the flag and took an oath of allegiance to the United States, an oath that support only reliable Union men and supporters of the government for any office, and furthermore, pledged themselves to elect any office to carry out the objects, principles of the League. Secrecy and protection to the brother leaguers were also shown. The entire series of oaths having been affirmed, they were given to the Freeman Pledge to defend and perpetuate freedom, and then all including members of the council, grouped by the altar. The president made a charge containing the explanation of more important symbols. The sign having been given, the initiation was complete. The organization in the South was very complete and consisted of a national council, one council for each state, and a territory for subordinate council each. The constitution of the National Council was very elaborate, but was never of any great importance, as the League worked distinctly in a local nature. State councils composed of representatives of subordinate councils had a general supervision and direction of the League within the state. The officers were presidents, vice presidents, recording and correspondence secretaries, and treasurer, with executive committee composed of members from each judicial district. Meetings were held annually, unless called more frequently. Subordinate council were established by the president through the deputy of each loyal county, and certain deputies were stayed at large. All loyal citizens of 18 years of age were eligible. New members were elected by a 3/4 vote of those who present. Officers of the local council were president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, marshal, herald, central, and chaplain. So far as it can be discovered, Alvin W. Touareg, who in 1866 organized a league in Gosford and Lomans and adjoining counties, was the first president of the state council. He was succeeded by William W. Holden, who held the office until he became governor. Upon his resignation, General M.S. Littlefield became president, but the Negroes, generally who were never told of the change, and continued to regard Governor Holden as their head as long as the League lasted. In the same way, they regarded the standard as the governor's mouthpiece, and so the organ of the League. Consequently, all violent demands and threats of that paper were regarded as authoritative utterance by such of the Negro members as it reached. All of this is no doubt the intention of the leaders who knew that the government name and official position will lend abhorrence to the League and hence himself. His constant pardoning of members of the order, guilty and convicted of crime, strengthened the belief that he not only confined to Negroes, but white men applied to him for charges as late as May 1869. Jordan Potter of Granville, who succeeded James H. Harris as vice president of the state council, said publicly and constantly that Governor Holden was still president in 1870. Governor Holden authorized the Standard to state that he had resigned, and this is probably true, but he constantly alluded to the fact that he had been called an absolute disposal of 80,000 men. And there was no doubt that his power over the League remained as strong as though he was the head. Therefore, in as much as great measure, he held responsibility for his acting insomuch as he controlled his activities justly so. Even many Republicans believed he had influenced the League to nominate persons for office whom he controlled for unworthy purposes. This was, however, scarcely just. There is no accurate sources of information as to the membership of the League in North Carolina. It is safe to say that over 90% of the Negro voters, and some who were younger. In the West, it was at first a large white membership. On August 1st, 1867, Buncombe County had 19 council members, 19 councils and 1,800 members. Rutherford had 1,200 members. Burke, Lincoln, and Cleveland all well organized, and for a time, the League was strong in a number of other western counties. Governor Holden's estimate of 80,000 for the whole state has been mentioned. In 1869, the standard placed the total membership at 70,000. And this is no overestimated, though it must be remembered by now that most of the white members have withdrawn from the League and have practically been dead in the West. So it was an all-black organization now. Soon after the organization of the League, a step was taken to calculate to the roles of the sharpest hostility among the white natives. In 1867, arms were produced and many local councils were converted to military companies which drilled constantly. So remember, let's go back up here a little bit more, just sidebar. You got 17 member people, right? Right here. In 1869, the standard place total membership at 70,000. And this is no overestimate. You must remember now that most of the white members have withdrawn from the League, and the League was practically dead in the West. Soon after the organization of the League, a step was taken and calculated to arouse sharpest hostility among the white natives. In 1867, arms were produced and many local councils were converted into military companies which drilled consistently. They speedily became a menace to the peace and the good order of respective communities. Often these drills took place on public roads, and at such time, our sentinels were posted on both sides to turn back anyone who might come up. Lawlessness of this sort was entirely without remedy by legal means. Greatly increased public hostility already felt. Public parades were among the early activities of the council and were a great assistance in adding membership. For never before had the Negroes been given an opportunity to take part in demonstrations of that kind, and an appeal irresistible to their nature. The processions in many cases that now became military in character, and the freedmen were entirely captivated. So all these public drills you see in these 70,000, local militias became a black militia in the state of North Carolina. The effect upon a mass of white population can hardly be conceived. In any event, trouble has been expected, and when the fact was added to the procession of armed Negroes was always seeking trouble. It is no matter of wonder that they often found it, and with that mild riots frequently resulted. Right? It speaks well for the self-restraint of the average citizen of the state that nothing worse happened, especially in such cases when the entire council in Raleigh in 1868 marched under arms to register. Fear of what the future held and the story increases, and is soon justified, for as long as the League became conscious of its strength, it began to take matters into its own hand, becoming increasingly difficult and dangerous to arrest another member, and once arrested, more difficult to hold them. In Chapman County, on 2 different occasions, the League opened a jail and released its members who were in prison. In many places, the prisoner was taken from the arresting officer. When, in spite of the activity on their behalf, which is said to be rather usual on the parts of the judge, convicted was secured, there was almost a certainty from a pardon from Governor Holden. In December 1869 at Wilson courthouses, in the case of 2 members of the League who were indicted for whipping a Negro for voting the conservative ticket, Judge Thomas refused to admit any evidence to show that the League had ordered the whipping, and sentenced them with being convicted to 30 to 60 days of imprisonment, respectively. They were immediately pardoned by the governor. In one Western case, the convicts were pardoned before they reached Raleigh. The Leaguers, as well as the conservatives, soon came to believe that the governor had promised immunity from punishment. The most common of the grave outrages committed by the Negroes was barn burning. All right? The most common of the grave outrages committed by the Negroes was barn burning. The full seriousness of this offense can be justly estimated only when the economic condition of the people is realized. The loss of a barn more frequently than not meant complete ruin and was often accompanied by the absolute want of food. In almost every county in the state, there were cases of this sort, and there was a mass evidence which proves conclusively that in many instances it has been decided upon a meeting in the meeting of the League. In many more, that had been done by members under the influence of the teaching they received in the councils. Often naturally, it was a result of some private grudge. The counties that suffered the most were Orange, Chapman, Edgecorn, Wake, Jones, and Gaston. In the last mentioned county, Gaston, there were 9 cases in 1 week. Edgecombe in 2 months in 1869 lost 2 churches, several cotton gins, a cotton factory, and a number of barn dwellings. Most of these could be traced to Negro incendiaries. In Orange, there were many scattered cases during 1869, 8, and 1869. In the latter years, 3 barns were burned at one time and inside of each other. The perpetrators, 2 Negroes named Morrow, were hanged by the Ku Klux Klan for this offense, combining with their threats they made against women in the community. The Chapman and Wake barn burners, who were particularly active, said that the burning had been ordered by Governor Holden. This, of course, not true, but it gives insight to the League's methods. It was not to be supposed that the members of the League confined themselves to politics and the burning of property. More profitable employment was popular. Ever since emancipation, theft by the freedmen had increased, but this is only caused only by the nature and the need of the Negro. The participant was now organized by the League, and livestock became increasingly unsafe in the neighborhood of the meeting place of a council, and movable property of all sorts was stolen to such an extent that the burden became almost endurable. It was not in any degree likely that the League as an organization often voted council and gave formal approval of such actions. It is certain, however, that in its very existence, the characters of its leader and a sort of emotional stimulation given to Negroes at the meetings were responsible for such a theft as well as injury to property, which is so distinguished the period. And before a great while, the League got credit for every violation of law, even though committed by white men who were not members. Acts of personal violence by the members upon white people, while no means were unknown, but in general, the organization worked in secret. It seldom gave warnings such later employed by the Ku Klux Klan, and rarely intimidated source of any violence committed. Much of his activity was deliberate and inspired by his leader. Moreover, probably was sheer unprovoked deviltry and responsible for what belongs nevertheless to the leaders who have begun the movement. In Anson County, the members of the League entered into an agreement for murder and robbery. In Edgecombe, there was a similar agreement. Murder was committed by armed bands of Negroes a number of times, notably that of Colonel John H. Nuttercut and his wife, in Jones in 1867, of the entire Fusco family in Jones in 1869, of Mr. Green in Jones in 1869, and Willis Benny and Pitt in 1869. These 2 counties each had councils of the League, which was only entirely corrupted by the Negro population. If not directly responsible for their influence, undoubtedly brought about the conditions of affairs which made it happen as possible. Of the protection of the courts, there is practically none, even in rare cases where the individuals were detected. At first, some attempts were made by conservative whites to check the growth and activity of the organization by refusing appointment of all members. But it soon became evident this means a refusal of employment of colored labor at all, and at a time when employment classes become a supplement, so sharp was the need for laborers felt. Throughout its existence, the League exerted in one way or another evil influence upon labor, and this is not the least important count in an indictment brought against it in the state. Adding an alarming fact that life and property almost lost security in large portions of the state. A wonder ceased their respect for the courts, and the law began to disappear. That a counter organizations followed, equally beyond the law, but intended to preserve public order. A retaliation so violent, a retribution so swift, that it came in a short time after the appearance of the Ku Klux Klan. The activities of the League became beautifully less and vanished altogether at the end of 1870. Now, this is written by, this is an old thing, but I'm going to get more into the ritual, you know what I'm saying, because, like I said before, it was a secret group, as I said before, and this page stated too, that a secret group, you had to be initiated into the group. So we're going to look a little bit more into that initiation and how that stuff went down for our ancestors. Also, too, if you read into this too, before I get into that, we also fought back. As you see, we was killing white folks. We was doing all type of stuff like that, burning down their stuff. We was doing a lot of things, you know. But what happened? Well, we're going to find out in later videos. All right, now this is from the book Spy the Rebellion, being a true history of the spies to the United States Army during the late rebellion, revealing many secrets of the war, hero not made public. You know what I'm saying? So this is written by Alan Pinkerton, and you know that he was the first Secret Service agent. You could say he was guarding Lincoln. You know what I'm saying? He was the first Secret Service agent. So he commanded the spies and all that stuff that was going on. Secret Service, CIA. He was the first. So let's read into this. I'm gonna read a chapter out of this short chapter to let y'all know what was going on. All right, we're gonna come out this chapter right here. This is chapter 22. You know, Webster and Scoble, a Negro as a spy, a traitor deserts from the army, woo the Loyal League, slaves as patriots. That's what we're gonna go to. All right. All right, we're gonna start from right here. John Scoble, I found, was a remarkably gifted man, one for his race. He could read, write, and was full of music as a feathered strongest and wobbled in tropical groves of his own sunny home. Okay. John Scoble was a very important spy during the Civil War, black spy. That's not really talked about in the history books. All right. While they was conversing together, a tall, dark man, whiskered man came into the room, and after a quick, nervous glance at Webster, requested to see the landlord in another room. As they departed, Webster bestowed a searching look upon the newcomer and once was impressed by the familiarity of his features. He recollected that while he was coming down the stage, the man riding rapidly behind him, seated in a buggy driven by a young Negro, had made several ineffectual attempts to pass the stage, and finally succeeded in doing so and disappearing from view. Webster had forgotten all about him until suddenly his appearance at the hotel and his suspicious actions attracted his attentions. After a lapse of a few minutes, the two men entered again, and the stranger immediately took his departure. Filled with curiosity to identify the man, Webster carelessly observed the landlord. The fellow seemed a little nervous, doesn't he? Yes, replied the landlord, and he has cause to be. He's a deserter from the Yanks. Was he an officer? Let's say he was a surgeon. All right. All right, so they got the surgeon up out of there, you know, so they got the packet from the surgeon who, you know, gave it back to Webster. So let's go more deep into this. Come this way, Scoble said in a low voice, taking Webster by the hand through a low door, which he rapped on 3 times. Webster scarcely take the time to vent his astonishment by a low whistle when the door unknowingly opened. There entered without challenge and found himself in the utter darkness, while Webster could hear bolts and bars being replaced upon the door. Listening intent, he thought he could hear the voices overhead and the noise of shuffling feet. Presently, he heard a real whistle from the conductor, which applied from all the above authority. Who comes? Friends of Uncle A, was the reply. What do you desire? Light and liberty, came the response. Immediately, a trapdoor overhead was opened, revealing a dimly lighted room and a rope ladder being let down before them. Mr. Webster, you go off first, said Scoble. I will follow. Webster's Dakota ropes and sitting easily found themselves in a dimly lighted room surrounded by a body of Negroes, numbering 40. Some of them were young men who had barely attained their majority, while others were middle aged, and a godly number of those heads who were snow as white. It was white as snow, excuse me. The room in which they assembled was quite large and entirely destitute of furniture. An upturned barrel with the American flag draped over it served as the desk of the president, and his seat was made of box, which once had been used as a packing merchandise for shipment. It was not long before Webster realized he was in the lodge of the Loyal League, almost exclusively of colored men, and whose branches extended over the entire South. So remember, this is a league, a Masonic league that extended over the entire South, connecting with the Underground Railroad, which is not really discussed that much. His welcome was cordial and hearty. Shortly after they became quiet, the president, a tall, well-informed Negro about 35 years of age, took his position and his deep, full voice addressed the meeting. He detailed the operation of the various lodges which he had visited and gave an encouraging account of the good work being done by the colored men throughout the country. He was listened to intently, and when he had finished, he was greeted with numerous applause, remarks of approval, and endorsement. Scoble, meanwhile, had closed the nature of the object of the Loyal League, although as yet prevented from taking up arms in defense of their rights. These colored men had banded themselves together to further the cause of freedom, to succor the escaping slave, and to furnish information of loyal commanders of the movements of the rebels as far as could be ascertained. The president of the League, Scoble said, was undertaking a trip to Washington. He is the person selected to carry the packet for me. Webster conversed with him for a short time and after spoken, find him reliable and willing to undertake such a task imposed upon him. He signified his willingness to trust him upon the delivery of the dispatches. All right, so we should stop there. So this is what they was doing. But one of the key things is Papa Unyet as prevented from taking up arms, although prevented from taking up arms in defense of their rights. So the Army knew about this group. A lot of people knew about this group. Martin Delaney. This is the group that wanted to stay here in the United States, that the Frederick Douglass type group we talked about before when they had the William Henry Garnett thing going on. He was talking about to iron himself and whatnot, woo, woo, woo. They set up this type of league that went against Garnett stuff, Henry William Garnett stuff. They set up this type of league, you know what I'm saying, which is outed and part of the Underground Railroad. We'll see, and we talk about more about that a little bit later. But I'm glad y'all listened to this video. I know it's kind of a lot, some good history here though. And much love to y'all and yours. We'll keep on pumping and making it happen. But don't let nobody tell you that, during Reconstruction, that we didn't fight back. Because it shows you right there in the thing I showed that yes, we did fight back. We was burning down buildings, you know what I'm saying, catching them in their sleep. All this being supplied by northern politicians, as you've seen, but something happened where things got cut off. We're going to get into that a little bit later. I subscribe to the channel, Koski and Funday. Much love to you and yours. Peace.